So guys, what's going on? What is going on? I hope you guys are well. I hope you guys are staying safe. So guys, Keith one-time Thurman has called out Errol Spence. Keith Thurman nowadays does a lot of talking. Unfortunately, he doesn't do a lot of fighting, just a lot of talking. I would prefer Keith Thurman to do a lot of his talking in the ring. But the last time he fought was against Manny Pacquiao, where he took a loss, where he took his first loss of his career. And unfortunately, since then, we haven't seen him in a boxing ring, but we've seen him doing a lot of interviews, him talking a lot. And a lot of boxing fans are becoming frustrated with Keith Thurman. Keith Thurman is sliding down the rankings. Keith Thurman is becoming irrelevant. We need to see him back in the ring now. He said that he wants that Spence fight right away. And Spence is fighting a lot of his competition, but he's not fighting Keith one-time Thurman. And Keith one-time Thurman can't understand why Errol Spence is so reluctant to fight him and why Errol Spence keeps saying that, he's not interested. Probably, Keith, because when you were champion and Errol Spence wanted to fight you, you decided to turn a blind eye and said that the fight needs to be marinated, and it seemed like you were avoiding him. And Errol Spence is holding a grudge, in my opinion, over that. And he's thinking, why do I need to fight Keith Thurman now? He's got nothing. If you were holding a belt, then obviously there would be a reason for Errol Spence to fight you. But because now you lost to Manny Pacquiao, right? You're no longer that relevant in the welterweight division. Errol Spence doesn't feel like he needs to fight you. And he's got a fight lined up with Ugas, because Ugas is the champion at the minute. See how tables turn very quickly? See how things change and tables turn? And unfortunately for Keith Thurman, he's no longer the pulling power that he once was. And now Errol Spence is the one that's calling the shots. The tables have turned, and Errol Spence now feels he doesn't need Keith Thurman. And Keith Thurman at the time, I remember Errol Spence was calling him out, wanted the fight, and Keith Thurman kept saying, he kept saying stuff about marination. I'll fight him, I'll eventually fight him. That fight needs to grow. And Errol Spence wasn't liking it. Errol Spence was saying, no, listen, let's fight. Keith keeps talking about him being injured. Keith was saying before that, I need to pay my dues. I went over to England, beat Kell Brook. Keith Thurman seemed like he was making a lot of excuses. But now, because Keith Thurman no longer holds a belt, Keith Thurman no longer is the welterweight champion, Keith Thurman now hasn't got the same awe that he once had when he was a unified champion. He's now calling for the Errol Spence fight. And Errol Spence ain't having it. Errol Spence is still holding a grudge because Keith one-time Thurman didn't fight him. And I understand. However, I want to see this fight, because there was a point in Keith Thurman's career where I thought Crawford and Spence, Keith Thurman could beat them. Now, not so much so, because I just think that Keith Thurman is inactive. Keith Thurman, I don't know whether he has the same hunger that he once had. And I just think Errol Spence is too relentless. Errol Spence has got a great chin. Errol Spence hits too hard to the body. And we all know what Keith Thurman's vulnerability is, his body. As soon as you attack that body, as soon as you start going down to that body, Keith Thurman is in big trouble. We've seen him hurt several times down there to the body. And unfortunately, Errol Spence is probably one of the best body punchers in the welterweight division. And that body is going to be targeted. And they already know that there's a weakness. And I just don't see... And I feel if Errol hurts him to the body, I don't think he's going to get away with it like he did against Pacquiao and all the other guys that hurt him. I think Errol Spence will finish him off, because Errol Spence will go back down there to the body. And Manny Pacquiao's not really a huge body puncher. He's not known for being a crazy body puncher, but yet he hurt Keith Thurman. Manny Pacquiao was tired towards the end of that fight, and that's why he wasn't able to close the show. Otherwise, I think Manny Pacquiao would close the show. I do think if Errol Spence, however, hurts Keith Thurman to the body, I think Errol Spence will finish Keith Thurman off. So for me personally, I think this fight for Keith Thurman, I personally think Keith Thurman made a huge mistake. Keith Thurman should have taken this fight ages ago when Errol Spence was more green. because I think Keith Thurman had a better chance then. Keith Thurman has now let Errol Spence develop into a beast. Keith Thurman has now let Errol Spence develop into a proper... Now, Keith Thurman may say, that's what I want. I want him to be on top of his game, and then I knock him off his perch. But that's not what you wanted. You were, in my opinion, he was avoiding Errol Spence because he thought that I'm at top of the hill right now. I don't need to fight Errol Spence. Let me make my money, enjoy myself. But things didn't work out for Keith Thurman because he got injured and then he became inactive. And then in that time, there's a consensus that formed around Errol Spence. And now there's Crawford that's come up to the welterweight division. Now Keith Thurman, after losing to Pacquiao, his relevance in the welterweight division has completely... He's below, for me, Garcia and Porter right now. Just because of how inactive he is. And the fact that his last fight he lost. So Keith Thurman now needs that big fight. Firstly, I think Keith Thurman needs that big fight to be motivated. Right? Because I don't know whether he's got the same hunger, desire he once had when he was on the way up looking to be a champion. I don't know whether... Keith Thurman's stay at the top was very short. Let's be honest. His stay at the top was very, very short. He barely stayed... You know, how long did he... You know, he managed to grab the belt, became world champion, then unified against Danny Garcia, and he didn't defend. He didn't defend his unification. He didn't ever defend his belts. Because he got stripped after that, because he was been inactive for so long. He got stripped. I think the WBC stripped him. And then that's when Porter held the WBC again, and Porter fought Errol Spence, didn't he? And they had a unification fight, and Errol Spence became the WBC champion. So Keith Thurman's career was very short at the top. He barely had much time at the top, which is never a good sign. And I always thought Keith Thurman was very talented and a very good fighter, but unfortunately his time at the top was very short-lived. And I personally think Keith Thurman should have taken the fight against Errol Spence when he was red hot, because I think he would have had the best chance then to beat Errol Spence. I think Errol Spence would destroy... I personally think Errol Spence beats Keith Thurman quite comfortably. Just because I think Keith Thurman has let Errol Spence develop into this beast. And now Keith Thurman is on the slide. And he's inactive. So for me, Keith Thurman's missed the boat. Because I actually think a couple of years ago, when Keith Thurman was a unified champion, if he had actually taken the fight with Errol Spence, I actually would have given Keith Thurman a very good chance. Not to say he would have won, but I would have given him a very good chance. Now I don't give him much of a chance against Spence at all. So for me, Keith Thurman's made a huge mistake here. Him avoiding Spence, because that's what he was doing. Let's be honest, Keith Thurman knows what he was doing. He was avoiding Errol Spence, trying to make money, but things backfired because he got injured. He was trying to pick more easier fights and look for other routes and try to make money, looking for the Pacquiao fight. He didn't want to fight. Even when he was champion and he came back and he fought Josecito Lopez, he didn't want to fight Errol Spence. He was asked when he was coming back. He wanted to fight Pacquiao because he knew that would have been a big payday for him. And he thought in his head that he would beat Pacquiao and it would be a huge payday. But Keith Thurman got beat. Now Keith Thurman's in a position where he's not fought for a very long time. He's not as relevant in the welterweight division. And he's thinking that, what do I do? Where do I go? So he's calling out Errol Spence because he knows he needs Errol Spence now. But Errol Spence now is on top of the tree. So Errol Spence is thinking, I don't need to fight Keith Thurman. And Errol Spence has become stubborn. So even though I would like to see Errol Spence fight Keith Thurman because I think it's a good fight, although I don't, like I said, I don't see Keith Thurman beating Errol, if I'm honest with you now. So personally, I would like to see Errol Spence fight Keith Thurman. Fight Terence Crawford. I wouldn't mind seeing Errol Spence v Keith Thurman if we can't get Errol Spence v Terence Crawford. But I think the chance of Keith Thurman winning, which would have been a lot higher a couple of years ago, now is a lot less, because I think Keith Thurman missed his boat. And it's sad because, like I said, I think Keith Thurman was very talented, but I think injuries and inactivity, and I don't know whether he's lost the desire and hunger. Maybe because when you get injured, when you get injured and you suffer serious injuries, which he may have suffered because, you know, he's been out for a very long time. When he fought Garcia, he was out for over 2 years. You see, when you suffer those injuries, your motivation dies away as well, because, you know, when you get back in the gym, you're going through pain, it's hard. And boxing's already a very tough sport. And your motivation, your hunger starts to, you know, disappear. And I just feel like Keith Thurman, for me, I think he could have achieved so much more. I think he could have achieved so much more. And unfortunately, it looks like his stay at the top is ended. I don't think he's going to become world champion again. I don't. I think that's what I mean. That's why when I said that Keith Thurman's stay at the top was very short-lived. Very short-lived. Unfortunately. You know, and that's just the way it is. He was very short-lived. You know, how long was he a champion for? You know, who did he beat? Did he beat Guerrero? Who did he beat for the title? I can't even remember. I think he might have been upgraded. I can't even remember if he beat anyone to become a world champion. But I know he unified fighting Danny Garcia. I can't remember whether he was upgraded or whether Mayweather decided to retire and he was upgraded to the WBA super champion. I can't remember exactly what the situation was. But I know Keith Thurman was a world champion, and then he fought Danny Garcia and became a unified champ. But like I said, this was very short-lived, because the Garcia fight, I believe, happened in 2016, if I'm not, or 2017. I can't remember. One of those years. No, actually, I think it might have happened in 2017, personally. Because I think in 2016, Khan fought Canelo. Was it? Yeah, Khan fought Canelo in 2016. And I think Keith Thurman and Garcia might have fought in 2017, I think. If I'm not mistaken, I'll check that anyway. But yeah, whatever the case is, you know, I just think Keith Thurman really, when he became champion, he didn't capitalize. Listen, it might have not been a fault of his own. It might have just been injuries, and sometimes that happens. You get injured and you can't come back from it. And I think Keith Thurman has not been the same fighter ever since he came back from the Danny Garcia fight. I just don't think he's been the same man. I think he's a completely different guy. I don't think he's there mentally. I don't think he's the same that he was early on in his career. He was so hungry. I don't think physically he's the same. And I think also his career decisions are a lot more business-minded now. Fact, a lot of his moves now are business. Like, he could have easily jumped in to fight Errol Spence when he was world champion, but he decided to fight Manny Pacquiao when Manny Pacquiao wasn't a world champion, because it was a business move, because he wanted to make as much money as possible. It was never about unifying or beating someone like Errol Spence, who was seen as the #1 welterweight. It was about fighting Manny Pacquiao because he knew that Manny Pacquiao was going to bring him more money. So Keith Thurman made a smart move from a business point of view, rather than you trying to unify the division. And although he got paid well for the Pacquiao fight, he ended up losing. And listen, it was probably the right move, because I think Spence would have beat him. I think Spence would have beat Keith Thurman quite comfortably, and he wouldn't have got paid as much. So it was probably the right move to fight Pacquiao. Because in his head, here's what he thought. He probably thought that Pacquiao's old. I'll beat Pacquiao. I'll get a huge payday. My profile will increase. Then I can fight a few more fights, milk it a little bit, then jump into a huge fight with Spence. But actually it backfired, because Manny Pacquiao ended up beating him, and then he's not fought since 2 years, and he's now becoming very, very inactive and becoming irrelevant in the welterweight division, and he needs to do something quick. Otherwise, you know, he's getting older by the day. The longer he's out the ring, the harder it's going to get when he comes back. Because when he came back in his warm-up fight, right? When he came back in his warm-up fight, when he was out after the Garcia fight, he almost got knocked out by Josecito Lopez. Keith Thurman is very, very vulnerable. Like, we saw Lopez almost stop him in that fight. You know, another referee might have even thought about stopping it in the 7th, when Lopez had him all over the place. Thurman was in big trouble. And how vulnerable he looked against Lopez, although he fought well against Manny Pacquiao, he was hurt in that fight several times, or twice at least. Put down, and then in the 10th he was hurt with a body shot. I just don't think he's got what it takes to beat someone like Errol Spence, who's very complete, who's very tough, got a very good chin. I just think he's the complete fighter, and I think Keith Thurman's going to struggle to beat him. And it's sad because I do think a couple of years ago, even though Keith Thurman always had those vulnerabilities, which have probably always made him a slight underdog against Spence, I think Keith Thurman had all the attributes, the skill, the boxing ability, the movement, the punch power, the fact that he was a big welterweight to give Spence a lot of trouble a couple of years ago. And I also think Keith Thurman back then, physically and mentally, was a different person, different fighter. I don't think Keith Thurman's that Keith Thurman that there was of 2015, 16, 17. I think this is a different Keith Thurman. I think this Keith Thurman's, you know, a lot different from a mental point of view, from a physical point of view. I just don't think he's the same guy. He's not Keith one-time Thurman anymore. You know, he's just Keith Thurman. And I think it's sad because I think his career at the top was short-lived. I do think that Keith Thurman, at one point, you could make a case when he would unify the division that he was definitely the #1 welterweight in the world. But like I said, it was short-lived. And there was guys there, like your Terence Crawfords that were coming up, like your Spences that were he was a world champion beating Brook. I just felt like Keith Thurman just fell away. Because what a mix that would have been. Because Keith Thurman would have... Listen, if Keith Thurman, right, was still in his prime and still plugging away, active, Keith Thurman, right, would have been seen amongst Crawford and Spence. And a lot of people would have thought that he would have give those guys good fights. And I'm not saying that people would have said that he would have been a favourite because he wouldn't have been in those fights. But I do think people would have been giving him a good chance of beating them. Because Keith Thurman, like I said, Keith Thurman could really fight. But unfortunately, I just don't know what happened. His career just slid away. And he's now, for me now, he's a gatekeeper for the guys at the top. I think that, you know, I think he gets beat by Crawford. I think he gets beat by Thurman. And I don't even know whether he beats Porter. I even think Garcia could be dangerous. And even someone like Virgil Ortiz for Keith Thurman could be very dangerous. Keith Thurman right now, that's why I think he wants to fight Spence, because he knows there's nowhere for him to go. He knows that if he gets fed to, or if he gets a fight with someone like Virgil Ortiz, he could get knocked out by Ortiz. So he's thinking to himself that why not me jump into the biggest fight possible with someone like Errol Spence for unified titles? If I lose, maybe I can see, get off into the sunset. I'll get a big payday and I can see myself off into the sunset. If I win, I'm back to the top. So Keith Thurman's looking for that glory where he doesn't want to go into fight with a Garcia or a Sean Porter because he knows that he could easily lose those fights. And then his career is virtually over. Whereas if he loses to Spence, he maybe can come back down a level and fight your Porter, fight your Garcia. But if he loses to Porter or Garcia, then it's completely, it's done, you know? And right now, a lot of people may even pick Porter and Garcia to beat him. So it's sad because Keith Thurman's careers just fell away and he was such a good fighter and so much talent, so much promise. Like I said, at one point, he was, Spence and Crawford were calling out Keith Thurman. They wanted that fight with Keith Thurman because he was the top dog in the division. He was the top dog. They were calling Keith Thurman out. Literally calling Spence and Crawford were calling Keith Thurman out. Spence, I remember, went on ESPN and basically Max Kellerman and Stephen A. Smith were trying to get Errol Spence to say Crawford's name, but Spence wasn't saying Crawford's name. He was saying, I want to fight Keith Thurman. He's the #1 welterweight. And same with Crawford. Crawford went on ESPN. He goes, I want to fight Keith Thurman. He's the #1 welterweight, not Spence. So Keith Thurman was the man that everyone wanted. He was the man in the welterweight division 3-4 years ago. Fortunately, his career just slid away, and it's a damn shame because I do think he's a lot better than Danny Garcia and Sean Porter. And he would have been, he would be way harder fight. If he was more in his prime, he would be a way tougher fight for Spence and Crawford than those guys because he had a lot more to his game. But unfortunately, his career slid away. And I don't know whether he can get that back now. Very difficult once you lose it to get that back. And I think it's going to be tough for now someone like Keith Thurman to get that back. And it's unfortunate, really, because like I said, I really rated Thurman. But his career has, unfortunately, you know, it's at the tail end of his career. And I think, listen, I would love to see Keith Thurman get that Spence fight. Let's see how he fights. I don't expect him to win, or I think Spence would stop him. But it still makes for a good, entertaining fight. And I think it would be a big pay-per-view event. I think it would definitely do numbers. And I think it would make Thurman and Spence good money. So I think it's definitely something that Spence should look at. I know Spence is upset and Spence not happy that Keith ducked him, but I still think it's a fight that people would be interested in and people would like to see. So make it happen, man. I would prefer to see Spence over Spence Ugas, but I know Ugas is champion, and I'd love to see Ugas get his opportunity at Spence. However, after that, if they can't get the Spence Crawford fight, then I would love to see Spence fight Keith Thurman. I think that would be a huge fight. What do you guys think? Let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comment section below, guys. And guys, remember to please like, share, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.